As always, our webinars are 1 hour long, and you will find yourself on mute until the end of the webinar, and that is just to make sure that our recording is clean and without any interruptions. We will make sure that we have time for questions at the end, but if you do have questions throughout the presentation, you can feel free to put them in the chat, and Laura will help address them. The recording is going to be sent out in a follow-up email later today or tomorrow morning. The quizzes webinar is part of our basic training series on Brightspace. The series loops in on itself, so if you missed any of the previous webinars, you can always view the webinar recordings on our YouTube channel, or you can sign up for future webinars. We have our schedule up through December. To quickly go through what the series consists of, getting started with Brightspace is a high-level overview of the Brightspace environment, the navigation, the interface, and some basic functionalities. ABCs of content is all about the basic building blocks of Brightspace, how to organize your course, how to add modules and topics, multimedia, different kinds of files and links. Engaging learners is about learning how to engage your students with each other, with the content, and with you as faculty, using Brightspace tools like announcements, discussion boards, groups, intelligent agents, and more. Assessing learning is primarily about creating and grading assignments, and a little bit on using the Quick Eval and the Gradebook tool. The last two, quizzes and Gradebook, are both deep dives into those specific areas within Brightspace. Both quizzes and Gradebook have a lot of different settings and a lot of different ways to navigate it, which is why we've dedicated a full hour to each of those. There is additional training available. You can join the Brightspace community with your CUNY login for free. You can also take the Brightspace resource course, which is available within our CUNY Brightspace environment. With this course, you can experience the student view of courses and also learn a little bit about different Brightspace functionalities. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a YouTube channel. The Office of Academic Affairs has their own YouTube channel that has all of the recordings of previous webinars, as well as some short videos that will help you see the life cycle of an assignment and discussion board and how to use the preview feature within quizzes. D2L, the parent company of Brightspace, also has their own YouTube channel. It's full of short clips on various Brightspace functionalities. Finally, we have CUNY IT Help, which is a CUNY-wide platform on all things CUNY technology, and it has articles, tutorials, how-tos with step-by-step guidelines on how to perform all sorts of different activities. But today, we are focusing on quizzes, and this is our agenda for today. So we're going to look at how we can create quizzes as well as how to edit existing quizzes. We're going to go through all of the different quiz settings. Then we're going to shift to working with the question library. So we're going to see how we can import questions from other courses or within the course, how to create sections, how to create question pools. And finally, we're going to talk about the different ways that we can grade quizzes. And just like with assignments, there are 3 different ways that you can grade quizzes, through the quizzes tool, through the quick eval tool, and through the gradebook, and we're going to go through all of those. If you haven't accessed the Brightspace environment yet, you can do so at any time by going to brightspace.cuny.edu and logging in with your CUNY login. Your CUNY login credentials is the same login that you use to access Blackboard, CUNY First, Microsoft 365, and all of the other single sign-on platforms. Your CUNY login username is your first name, last name, the last 2 digits of your EMPL ID at login.cuny.edu. And before I jump into working with quizzes, as always, I want to give a disclaimer that what I see on my screen when I'm within Brightspace is not going to be exactly what you see on yours when you log in. The first reason is that I am part of the central office, so the configuration that you see on my screen is the central office configuration. What you see when you log into your campus is going to be a little different. So if you're affiliated with just one campus, when you log in, you might be seeing your campus homepage, which might look something like this. So we have the campus logo, we have the campus navigation bar, which is going to have different items on it depending on the campus. Most notably, the college resources that are specific to the campus. The same goes for the course homepage as well. Those are also configured to specific campuses. The second reason why my screen is going to look a little different is because my role in Brightspace is the administrator role, whereas your role would be a faculty role, possibly staff or student. So we're going to see slightly different things. I am going to jump into my sample course because when we're working on quizzes, we have to be working within a specific course. We can very easily move our quizzes in the question library between our courses on Brightspace, and we're going to talk about that a little later, but we do have to be working in a specific course when we're creating. So the first place we're going to go is the quizzes tool page. There are a couple of ways to get there. I can navigate to the quizzes link on my navigation bar. If your navigation bar does not have quizzes across, you might want to look in all of the different drop downs. As I mentioned, the different campuses have different configurations, and a lot of them have condensed all of these links to a few drop downs, maybe an assessments drop down or a tools drop down. So I do recommend that you click on each, figure out where everything is located. Just because it's structured slightly differently does not mean you're missing anything. You're still going to have access to all of your tools. The second way for you to access quizzes or any other tool is through the course admin area. So if nothing else, I do recommend that you locate how to access your course administration area, because once you click on that, you will have access to all of the different tools that are available to you within the course. Here is the quizzes link. Whether I choose this link or this link, it is going to bring me to the same location, which is the quizzes tool page. Now we could be working with two different scenarios here. The first scenario is that I am creating my course completely from scratch. It is fully blank. I have nothing on here, in which case I will not see anything on this page and I would have to create a new quiz. The second scenario is that I am copying over a migrated course from Blackboard. So it's a course that I've already taught. I just might need to make some edits to the existing quizzes. So we're going to go through each scenario. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new quiz from scratch, and then I will show you how you can edit existing quizzes and how you can use the bulk edit function. So we're going to create a new quiz. We're going to click on the new quiz button. It's going to take us to a page that looks a lot like the page for when we're creating a new assignment or a new discussion board. So we have our title, description, and grade information on the left side. All of our settings are located on the right, and the questions area is located below. Quiz title is mandated. So as you can see by the asterisk here, you have to include a quiz title. This is the title students are going to see when they click on the quizzes area, or if you add this quiz to a module as a topic, or if you refer to this quiz using the insert quick link function. So I'm going to keep it easy. Hopefully I don't already have that one. You can also add a description. As you can see, as soon as I click into the description text box, I have all of my different formatting options here. So I can format my text, can change the color, bold, underline, add bullet points. I can also upload files, or if I wanted to add a video note, so I want to record myself giving video instructions rather than type them up, I absolutely can do that. I can refer to existing activities using insert quick link. I can insert images, emojis, symbols, even code. I don't have to add anything to the description if I don't want to. Then I have the due date. So most of the quizzes that we create are probably going to have a due date. So let's set one up. And as soon as I choose a due date, I have the option to select the due time as well. By default, it's going to be 11:59 p.m., but I can change that to anything I want. Now let's move down to the questions area. So right now we're operating under the assumption that we're working from scratch. So we're not going to have any options within our add existing. Once we've worked on our question library a little later in the webinar, we'll be able to use this dropdown. But for now, we're just going to create a couple of new questions. I'm going to use the create new dropdown, go to new question. And these are all of my different options for the kinds of questions I could have. These are very similar to what we had in Blackboard. We can have our multiple choice, true or false, fill in the blank, matching ordering, written response, some math ones. I'm just going to create some very basic ones. The first one is going to be multiple choice. As soon as I select the type of question I want, you can see I have a pop-up window where I'm going to enter the question details. We have question text. Once again, as soon as I click into it, I have all of my formatting options. So a question that we get every once in a while is, if I'm teaching an art history class, can I add images to the question and the answers? And the answer is absolutely, of course. You can add different files, you can add links, you can add videos, whatever you want. For now, I'm just going to keep it very basic. You can see as soon as I start typing, the preview of the question appears on the right-hand side. Next, I'm going to type in a few answers. And once again, as I'm typing them in, you can see that they are popping up in the preview area. If I want to have more than 4 options in my multiple choice, I can click Add Answer, and I can keep adding them. If I need to remove any of them, I can click the X icon. I can also move them around as well. So if I hover to the left of the answer, I get my 4 arrows, and I can just drag and drop, and you can see it changes in the preview as well. The next option we have is to randomize the answer order. So if I click on this, every time the student clicks into the quiz, the order of these responses is going to change. So now you can see I can't move them around because it doesn't really matter. It's going to be random every time. If you do have answers like all of the above or none of the above, we don't recommend using the randomize because then you have no control over where that all of the above or none of the above appears. Next, let's look at the different options we have available to us in the options dropdown. We can add feedback. As soon as I select that, you can see that each of the answers now has a feedback text box. So this would be real-time feedback to students. As soon as I click and submit the quiz, they will be able to see the feedback depending on the response that they chose. I can add a hint. This will allow students to click on a button to receive a hint. It says right here, hints are currently off in the quiz settings, so you do have to make sure you turn them on if you would like your students to be able to use this feature. I can add a short description to this question. I can also add custom weights. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for multiple choice, but if we had something like multiple select where I had multiple correct answers, I could actually put in custom weights for each answer. By default, if I had, for example, 2 correct answers, it would divide it down the middle, so each one would be 50%. But if I want one answer to weigh more than the other because it's more important, I can change those custom weights. And then the final option, which I already had on, but I will be off by default, is to add enumeration. So this is what my question and answers looks like by default. If I add enumeration, I can add a number or a letter in front of each answer. And if I scroll down, these are my different options for enumeration. I can have Arabic or Roman numerals or letters, uppercase or lowercase. And every time you change something, it will change for you in the preview area. The last option we have is the amount of points this question is going to be worth within your quiz. So let's say this one's going to be worth 3 points. We're going to click Save. If there are any issues with our question, the system will let us know. In this case, it has highlighted the trouble area in red, and there's also a pop-up saying that I've forgotten to select a correct answer. Because this is multiple choice, it has a correct answer. If I let the system know what the correct answer is, the system will be able to automatically grade it for me. In fact, almost every kind of question has a correct answer, whether it be fill in the blank, multiple choice, multiple select, everything except for the written response. So theoretically, you could have the system grade all of your quizzes without any involvement from you, as long as you provide the correct answers. So now I have fixed the issue. I'm going to click Save. And this time I'm going to get a banner that says Saved Successfully. And I can see my question here under the questions section. I can see the amount of points it's worth. I have my total points going here. And in the grade area, the points are also going to accumulate. So I usually wait until I'm done creating my quiz before I add it to the gradebook. You can see by default it is not in the gradebook. If I create my quiz first, it'll accumulate all of my points, and then I can just add it to the gradebook and it will automatically have the correct number of points. So let's create another question. This time let's go with true or false. Just want to point out that we have all of the same different options here. Still have to select the correct answer and the number of points it's worth. The last question I want to add is going to be a written response because that one is a little different. So again, create new question. I'm going to scroll down to written response. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this does not have a correct answer. This is going to present the student with a text box where they can type up whatever amount of text that they need for the question. This could be a paragraph, this could be a whole essay. It is up to you. So I'm going to put in my question text. Again, I have all of my different formatting options. And in the preview area, we can see what the student is going to see. It's just going to be the question and a very plain text box. If I want my students to have access to different formatting options, so maybe this is an essay, I want them to have headings, I want them to have the ability to bold or italicize, I can enable HTML editor. Once I select that, you can see my preview change and all of the different options my students are going to have. So they can change the font, the color, they have alignment, bullet points. Furthermore, if I want my students to be able to add images or add attachments to their response, I can allow for that as well. And now you can see there's an option for the students to add a file, or they can record an audio or a video response. We're going to put in the amount of points this is worth and click Save. So now I have 3 questions in my quiz. The total points is 10, and you can see it updated here as well. There's a couple more things I want to show you here. If I select a question, the More Actions drop-down becomes available. And here are some things that I can do to that question. So if I want to delete it, this is where I could do that. If I want to make a question extra credit, I can toggle bonus. So once I do that, you can see now it says the 3 points are bonus, and the total points are updated to 7. So the 2 required questions. The 3 points that are bonus would be just on top of the 7 points. The other thing I can toggle is mandatory. What mandatory means is that the student cannot leave the answer blank. They would have to answer the question before they're able to submit the quiz. If it's not mandatory, that means the student can leave the answer blank and move on to the other questions. Finally, if I want to quickly reset the amount of points the different questions are worth, I can do that under set points. So if I wanted to reset these both to maybe 4 points, I can do that quickly. And you can see that coming up here. Finally, unless I select for the questions to be randomly shuffled, which we're going to do in the settings, the questions are going to appear in the order that they appear here. So if I wanted to reorder them, I can drag and drop once again by hovering to the left of the question, and then I can just drag and drop. That didn't work very well. There we go. And then the questions will appear in this order. I'm going to toggle this to visible, and I'm going to click Save and Close. So here is the quiz I just created. And now I want to spend just a couple of minutes on this page to show you what it looks like. If we're working under the assumption that we have migrated a course from Blackboard to Brightspace and we want to reuse the material from that course, and we might just need to make a few changes, we can do that using the bulk edit function. So we can either click the checkboxes next to the quiz, or we can click the Select All checkbox at the very top and click on Bulk Edit. That is going to take us to a page where we can make changes to the names of the quiz. So I can see the quiz I just created doesn't actually follow the convention. I can also categorize the quiz. Now, you don't have to use the categories. If you have a lot of quizzes and you would like for them to be organized, maybe you have pop quizzes versus the midterm or the final, and you want to make sure that they're in separate sections, you can do that. You can create category by using the Add Category link. And it'll automatically assign that quiz to that category. Other things I can change on this page is that I can toggle the visibility for students, and I can change the number of attempts allowed on the quiz. When I'm done, I can click Save, and it brings me back to my quizzes tool page. You can see now it's under a different category, and the title has changed as well. So now let's talk about how we can edit an existing quiz. It's as simple as creating a quiz. All you have to do is locate the quiz you want to edit, click on the drop-down next to the quiz title, and go to Edit. And that is going to bring us to exactly the same page that we were just on. So the moral of the story is that you can come back at any time and change different quiz settings. Nothing is set in stone until students actually start taking the quiz. Once students start taking the quiz, certain things are locked, and any changes that you make are only going to be going forward. None of the changes you make to a quiz that's already been taken are going to be retroactive. So just keep that in mind. The next thing I want to go over are the different quiz settings that we have on the right here. So I am going to start with timing and display. We'll come back to availability a little later. And the first option here is to set a time limit. So if I want the quiz to be timed, I can select how long I want the timer to run for, maybe 20 minutes. And I have some timer settings here. Some options here are, how do I want the quiz to start? Do I want it to be synchronous or asynchronous? Asynchronous is your typical hybrid scenario where you have until the due date and the student comes in whenever they have the time, and then they have 20 minutes starting whenever they launch the quiz. Synchronous would be for a situation where you want everyone to take the quiz at the same time. So maybe a midterm or a final where you want everyone to start the quiz Monday morning at 8 a.m. and they have 20 minutes from that time period. That would be synchronous, and obviously you would have to set the start date for that. Most quizzes are going to be asynchronous as long as they're before the due date, so we can leave it there. We can also decide what happens when that 20 minutes runs out. You have the option to have the quiz attempt automatically submitted. So wherever the student is within the quiz, as soon as the 20 minutes are up, it gets submitted, even if they were in the middle of a sentence. We have the option to allow the student to continue working, but it will be flagged as exceeded time limit. And you have the option to do nothing. So the time limit is strictly psychological. Once you decide all of that, click OK, and let's keep going. Next options we have are for paging. Do we want all of the questions together on the same page, or do we want to divvy it up? So our options are to have 1 question per page, 5 questions, 10 questions, or each section gets its own page. And we'll talk about sections a little later. If I select to have multiple pages, I do get this option here to prevent from going back to previous pages. That means that once the student has answered a question, clicked next, they will not have the ability to go back to look at the previous questions or be able to change those answers. So if your quiz builds on itself, where you're worried that some of the later questions might help answer previous ones, this is definitely an option. Then we have the option to shuffle the questions within the quiz. So if you want these questions to appear in random order for each student, that's an option for you. If you want to be able to use hints, this is where you would allow that. And disable email instant messages and alerts within Brightspace is on by default. And I think a lot of the campuses have those items turned off campus-wide as well. The next section is attempts and completion. How many attempts are you going to allow your students? If we click on Manage Attempts, we can choose a number between 1 to 10 or unlimited. If we choose to allow the student more than 1 attempt, we have the option of deciding which attempt is used for calculation. So we could use the highest, the lowest. We can average them all out, so each attempt matters, first or last. If the student is allowed more than 1 attempt, you can decide what that looks like. When the student takes the quiz for the second time, for their second attempt, do they have to take the whole quiz over again, or should they only look at the questions that they got incorrectly? If you want them to retake incorrect questions only, there is the checkbox for that. If you want your students to only have access to a second or third attempt in certain circumstances, such as if a student got like 92%, you don't really want them to be able to take the quiz again. But if they failed the quiz, you want them to have a second attempt, you can set those percentages here. Obviously, you don't have to, and if you don't, then all students will have access to those second and third attempts. This is where we can also categorize our quiz. We can create a new category right from here as well. Moving on to evaluation and feedback. The first option is to automatically publish attempt results upon completion. So what that looks like, if you have this checked off, the student is going to take the quiz, they're going to hit submit, and then the second they submit, they will be able to see their grade. So this makes a lot of sense if you have maybe all multiple choice, nothing for you to review, no written response, and you want the students to have access to their feedback immediately or to the score. If you do have written response or for some reason you don't want to release the grades until everyone all at once, you can uncheck this. I do want to point out that if you have automatically published checked off and you have a written response, what's going to happen is that when the student sees their result immediately upon completion, they will have 0 points for their written response. So that grade is going to be skewed until you come in to manually grade the written response. So just keep that in mind. Going further down, when the grade is finally published, whether it's automatically or once you release the grade yourself, what do you want your students to see? Do you just want them to see the grade? Do you want them to have access to the questions they got incorrectly, with or without the correct answers? Or do you want them to have access to all of the quiz questions with or without the correct answers? And these are the same options that Blackboard has as well. Finally, let's go back up to the availability section. Here is where we can set our start and end date. So if you are creating quizzes at the beginning of the semester and you want them released at certain times throughout the semester, this is where your start date comes in. So maybe I am creating this quiz right now, but it's actually for Monday. I can set that start date here. I can set a start time as well. If I want the quiz to disappear after a certain date, I can do that as well. So if I want the quiz to no longer be visible after the due date has passed, I can set up an end date. Next, I have release conditions, also known as adaptive release in Blackboard. And this is for situations where you don't want the student to have access to this quiz until they have completed a certain item or there's a certain trigger done within Brightspace first. So for example, if this could be a makeup quiz, so if they have failed a previous quiz, you can set a release condition that this quiz is only visible if they received less than 50% on a previous quiz. For the most part, if you want all of your students to have access to this quiz, you do not have to worry about release conditions. The next thing on our list is special access, and this is where we go in if we have students that require special accommodations. So I'm going to click on Manage Special Access. I have two options here. The top option allows selected users special access to this quiz is our special accommodations option. The second option, allow only users with special access to see this quiz, is for situations where you have specific students and you know their names who need access to this quiz. For example, if you have two students that missed the midterm due to being sick and you have worked with them and you have allowed them to take a makeup midterm, you would use this and select those two students and they would be the only ones that would be able to see this quiz. We're going to stick with the special accommodations option. We're going to click on Add Users to Special Access. And we're going to get a pop-up where we're going to select those special accommodations. Things we could do is provide a different due date, so maybe give them an extra week. Have a different start date, make it available to them early. Or a different end date, make it available for them until later. We can also override the time limit. So everyone else gets 20 points, 20 minutes. I can give my students with special access 40 minutes. I can also decide what happens when the time limit expires. These are the same options I had within the quiz settings. Finally, I can give them more attempts. So everyone else had 3 attempts. Maybe for special access, I'm allowing 5 attempts. Then I scroll down to my class list. This list is going to have every student that is enrolled in my class, and I just have to select from this list the students that are going to have that special access and click Save. And yep, it looks like there's an error in that the end date is coming before the due date. So as I mentioned earlier, Brightspace is going to point out to you if there are any issues. Once I click Save, I can see who my students are with special accommodations, what those accommodations are, I can come in to make edits by clicking the edit icon, or I can remove their special access by clicking the X icon. I'm going to click Save and Close. And that's it for the quiz settings. So once again, I'm going to save and close. And the next thing I want to talk about is the question library. We can access it by clicking on the question library tab. So far, we've worked under the Manage Quizzes tab. So we're going to go to question library. And I am just going to delete everything, because when you're first starting within a course, your question library is going to be completely blank. Even if you are working in a migrated course that has multiple quizzes, the question library itself is going to be blank. It is going to be up to you to populate it. You might be asking me, if I already have quizzes set up in my course, why would I need to use the question library? And that's a great question. If you would like to be able to reuse your questions, so maybe you have questions that appear in weekly quizzes, but also you want to pull from them for the midterm. Using the question library allows you to reuse the questions without having to retype them up or recreate them. You can also very easily move the question library from one course to another. So you could actually build out a master question library with all of the questions that you have for any of your courses, and then just easily move it around. So it is up to you whether or not you want to use it, but we are going to take a look at what that looks like. So there are a couple ways to populate it. Obviously, you can just create new questions right from here. This is going to be the same process as when we created questions within the quiz. It's just going to go directly into the question library rather than into a specific quiz. We can also import. If I have a publisher test bank available to me through my textbook publisher, I can upload that file right here. The other thing I can do is browse existing questions. So this would be if I have quizzes within my course, I can import questions from those quizzes into the question library. So in this dropdown, I can select the quiz. So I'm going to stick with general knowledge quiz. It has 5 questions. I can select specific questions, or I can click the select all checkbox, click import, and it's going to add those questions to my question library. I'm going to do that one more time. So import, browse existing questions. I can see that these have already been imported because they already have the green checkbox, check mark. So I am just going to choose a different quiz. I'm going to select those items, click import. And now I can see all of my different questions in a list. So if we're working with a lot of questions, this could get messy really quickly because it's just going to be in a long list. So what we can do is organize it by using folders, or what they're called in here is sections. Before we do that, I just want to quickly go over what I can see on the screen here. So I can see the question text. Then I can see the type of question it is. So multiple choice, fill in the blank, order, true or false. I can see the number of points it's worth, if there's difficulty associated with it, if it's a mandatory question, and finally, the last time it was modified. So now I'm going to create a new section by going to the new dropdown and clicking section. And I am going to name it. I have an option here to hide the section title from learners. If you are creating a quiz and you're adding the entire section from the question library into that quiz, you can allow the learners to see the title. So maybe you want them to see which questions came from the week 1 quiz and which questions came from the week 5 quiz. If you don't want them to see that, you can just select this checkbox. You can add a section description. You can also choose to shuffle the questions in this section. For now, I'm just going to click Save. And now I can see I have my section here. It looks like a folder. And I can also see my tree here on the left-hand side. So I am going to select the questions that go into that folder. Then I'm going to click Move. And I'm going to select the folder where I am moving to. I'm going to do the same process again. So I'm going to create a new section. Here's my second folder. And once again, I'm just going to select the questions that go into that folder, click Move, and click on the folder it's going to. So now this is a little more organized. I can use the tree on the left-hand side to click into each folder to see the questions in there. The next thing I want to show you is how you can very easily move your question library or your quizzes between your Brightspace courses. For that, we are going to go to Course Admin, and we're going to use the Import Export Copy Components tool. We're going to go through the same process that we used when we copied an entire course in our ABCs of Content. So we're going to copy components from another org unit. We're going to search for offering, and we're going to use some keywords that are in the title of the course in order to locate it. We're going to select the course, click Add Selected, and now we're going to go down here, and we're going to choose Select Components. When we were copying the entire course, we used Copy All Components, but this time we're only interested in the questions. So we're going to click Select Components. We're going to scroll down to the question library. It's got 40 items in it. We're going to select that. We can select individual items, or we can just copy all 40, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to click Continue. Since it's a question library, we don't actually need to offset the date, so I'm just going to click Finish. And it is going to tell me the copying is in progress. Depending on the size of the question library, this might take up to a couple of minutes. We're working with only 40 questions, so this should be done any second now. And there we go. So I'm going to go back to the question editor. I'm going to go back to question library. I just need to refresh the page. And now you can see that in addition to the 2 folders that I created earlier, we have all of these different other folders that were imported from the Brightspace course into this Brightspace course. So now our question library is all built up. So I want to show you what it looks like when we're adding it to a quiz. So we're going to edit our quiz. And now we can use the Add Existing dropdown. So once again, we can use a publisher test bank if we have it. We can upload it right here, or we can browse the question library. I can either add a whole section, or I can add a specific question from a section. I'm going to click Import. And this is what it looks like. So if you're adding a whole section, it's going to have its own heading. And remember, that's when we were deciding, do we want our students to be able to see this heading, or do we want it to be blank? One more scenario I want to run through with you is if you have a number of questions and you want to choose some questions from that pool. So let's say you have 100 questions and you want to choose 10 random questions from that pool so that it's a different experience for each student. We can do that using the question library. So we're actually going to go to Create New, and we're going to select Question Pool. We can name our question pool. We can go to Browse Question Library to choose the questions. I'm just going to select all of the questions in here. So I have the option of 39. And let's say I want 5 random questions from those 39. So each student is going to get 5 random questions that are chosen from the 39 existing ones. I figure out how many points each question is going to be worth, and I click Save. And now at the very bottom here, I can see that my questions 10 through 14 are a question pool, selecting 5 random questions from the 39 existing questions worth 1 point each. So this is my quiz. At the end, now that I'm done creating it, it's worth a total of 30 points. And since I'm done with it, now is a good time to add it to the gradebook. So I click on the Not in Gradebook dropdown. I can either link it to an existing grade item, or I can just add it to the gradebook by creating a new grade item. That means it's going to have its own column in the gradebook, and it's going to be out of 30 points. Now I am truly done, so I'm going to save and close, and now we're going to take a look at how we can grade quizzes. So the first way to grade quizzes is going to be right on this page through the quiz tool page. I am going to click on the drop down next to the quiz name and go to grade. That is going to take me to the page where I am going to see all of the different attempts that were submitted. I can see the student name. If it's overdue, like 189 days overdue, I'll be able to see that as well. And I can see how the system graded each quiz. I can click into the attempt to be able to review the quiz. So I can see what the student answered. I can provide question by question feedback. So you can see after each question, I have question feedback. And I can add the different feedback in there. The second way for me to grade my quizzes is going to be through the quick eval area. So we can access the quick eval widget by scrolling down on our home page. We can see that here. And if I have any quizzes to grade, it's going to let me know right here. I can click on that and it'll take me to those submissions. Or I can go into the quick eval tool page where I'm going to have a little more information on what's going on. So I can view by submissions. On this page is going to show me the student, what they've submitted and when. So my quizzes are going to be marked with little question marks. So I can click on this and go to that submission, or I can view it by activity. So I can actually scroll down to, close your eyes. I can scroll down to a specific quiz. I can see how many attempts there are. And I can click on that link and it will take me to the attempts. You can see I can toggle between the different attempts right here in the corner. So here, once again, this looks exactly the same as it did when I accessed it through the quiz tool page. I can provide feedback, and here is a written response. Right, so all of these say auto-graded because they have a correct response that the system is aware of. For a written response, it's going to say it's not graded. A default value of 0 was assigned. And then I would have to come in here, read the response, decide how I want to grade it. And then once I'm done grading, I can click on Publish or Save Draft. Publish is going to release the grade to the student. Save Draft will save it until I am ready to release the grades. So if I click Publish, now the student is going to have access to their grade. I did also want to point out, so I pointed out that there is question by question feedback. I do also want to point out that there's overall feedback. So this is the attempt feedback. It's going to appear right next to their grade in the grade book. They would be able to see that, and it relates to the quiz as a whole. Once I have submitted the grade, at any point in time, I can come back here and make a change if I want. Click Update. If I am making the change manually, so the scores for each question do not add up to the attempt grade, it's going to let me know, but I can override that. So if I'm giving them like an extra point for being the first person to submit the quiz or something, I can definitely do that, even though it's not going to add up correctly. I can also retract. So this option here is for when I want to remove the grade from the student gradebook. They will not be able to see the grade or the feedback until I publish it once again. The last way for me to grade my quizzes is through the grades area. So this is my gradebook. I'm just going to scroll over until I hit a quiz. All right, there we go. There's our quizzes. Next to each quiz, you're going to see an icon. Some of the icons are going to have a little orange badge next to them. That means that this is a quiz that hasn't been graded yet. So I can click on this. It'll open it in a pop-up window. I am able to see how many attempts were made. If there's more than one, I can click into each one. And once again, this looks exactly like all of the other quiz grade pages. I can provide overall feedback. I can change the scores. I can provide question by question feedback. Once I'm done, I can either save draft or publish. And publishing is going to release the score into the gradebook. So the very last thing I want to show you before we open it up for questions is actually the preview. So for most other things, if you want to see it from the student perspective, you would go into your name dropdown and click on View as Learner. It's not quite the same for quizzes. For quizzes, if you want to preview it as a student, you would actually go into the edit within the quiz and click on Preview right here. And that will allow you to see what the student would see, the quiz details, the instructions, and you can start the quiz and go through it. On the Office of Academic Affairs LMS YouTube page, there is actually a video that goes through the process of how you can preview the quiz and then be able to grade that quiz attempt. So I definitely recommend that. And I want to show you that you can access that from our Brightspace transition page. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. If I scroll down a little bit, get to training and resources. This is where you can access the LMS Transition YouTube channel with all of those videos I was referring to. All of the other different resources, like the D2L YouTube channel, the student information is here, and just a little further down is where you can find your campus team's contacts. So if you have any questions, a lot of them are going to be specific to your campus configuration or your campus integrations. Just locate your campus, expand that. You'll be able to see the website, the shared mailbox, and the folks that are involved in the transition. And these are the people that you can reach out to for assistance with the transition. So with that, I want to check in with Laura to see if there's anything I missed or anything I should cover, and then we'll open it up.
No, you did a great job. Michael just had a question at the end, or a statement that his start button is missing in Learner View. And that's because the Learner View in Brightspace is not the learner experience like we used to have in Blackboard. It's literally just the view. So when you're in learner mode, View as Learner in the top right corner of Brightspace, it's not going to give you a start button to take your own quiz. So that's why she was showing about how to do the preview quiz, is sort of a way to get around that little issue. But yeah, so you
do have the start quiz when you go into the preview area. Thank you, Laura. Yes, okay, so you should be able to unmute yourself now, John.
Hi. First of all, thanks for this presentation. Question is, I just want to make sure that I understand the difference between randomize and shuffle. Randomize is regarding the answers to each question, and shuffle is shuffling around the questions. Is that correct?
Yes. So within the question view, you can randomize, meaning that the answers for that specific question are going to come up randomly. Shuffle, that's, I think, under attempts and completion, would shuffle the actual questions around the quiz.
Right. Now, my question is on randomize. You mentioned that if we have none or all, not to use the randomize, but if we're clicking off the answer on a multiple choice, and one of the choices is, I can see none of the above, because the none of the above could be the first one and would be none of the below. So I could sort of understand that reasoning. But if my answer is, say, B, and D is one of my randomize, is none of the above, all of the above, I don't quite understand.
If you switch the wording to none of these or all of these, then it wouldn't matter. So I think that's all they're trying to do, is when they say don't do this with like questions that have none of the above or all the above, because you don't know if the last one is going to be the none of the above or all the above. So if you just change the wording to none of these answers or all of these answers, that resolves that.
Right. So it's the word above that is the
right, because you have no control over where they're going to end up.
Right. I get that. My last question is, in Blackboard, I was able to make the midterm available to the students through either go into the content, or through I had a link on the left-hand side at the very top. How do the students access the actual quiz or the midterm? Do I say go into content and?
So that's a great question. There are a few different ways students can access it depending on how you set it up. If you have the quizzes on the navigation bar, students would just be able to click on quizzes and they would have this view. They'd be able to see all of the quizzes that are available to them at that moment.
Okay.
Or if you add your quiz to a module, like your week 2 module, you can add a quiz, here. Okay. And then it'll be on the list.
Okay.
So you can do it that way. Okay,
great. Thank you.
Of course. A third way you can add it, if you want, would be in the module description itself. So I've been mentioning the insert quick link button. So if you wanted to, add the quiz as a link, you can do that. And then the students would be able to access it just by clicking the link. Okay, so there's multiple ways. Yeah.
Thanks.
No problem. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you learned something. Feel free to reach out to your Campus Point people if you have any follow-up questions, and have a wonderful day.